start that.
Okay.
Quick question. Is it cool if I set a chair up like here so I can use it like as a podium on like our spare desk? I personally, I prefer to speak standing up, so.
Also, yeah, are we just gonna stand?
You're
and
literally
say-
just gonna stand and say from where you're at.
Okay,
If you
yeah.
want to add something underneath it,
We can hold our computers, right, to like
Yeah,
look at
I-
our information.
as long as you're just dead, not, as long as you're not like that,
Yeah.
and I can see eye contact.
What about the crossbars? We're
I
just gonna
don't
stay where we are.
Crossbars, you can stand if you want to. I just ask that you be respectful of
We
each
don't
other.
even have to stand?
Awesome.
Do we have to stand when giving
Huh?
our? Oh my god, I'm gonna
Yeah.
sit, thank you.
It's preferred.
If you want to,
feel
you're welcome
so
to
much
use it
better
too.
about that.
I
I'm
just
sitting.
I hate speaking like this because you have to like scroll and it's
No, I
awkward.
feel that.
Alright, let's. Okay. Who's affirmative, who's negative?
We're affirmative.
Affirmative.
Affirmative, alright, nope, we lost a person on Zoom. Alright, I'm gonna have a
Oh,
timer.
bummer.
Isaiah's gonna have a timer. Do y'all need, are y'all gonna have any of your own personal timers?
We'll have timers. Yeah, probably time.
Okay,
Your honor.
y'all ready?
Yeah.
Alright, first speaker, you ready, Isaiah?
Yep.
First speaker, you may begin.
We introducing ourselves? Alright, so first I want to set the resolution here that this House regrets the dominance of the fossil fuel economy. And then I'll begin. Fossil fuels seem to unlock the future when humans were first able to harvest and utilize them. It led to the Industrial Revolution and great progress globally. However, actions have consequences. Our over-reliance on fossil fuels has damaged the sustainability of our planet and created a multitude of ethical conflicts. For these reasons, we're proud to affirm that this House regrets the dominance of the fossil fuel economy. So first, I want to set some definitions for this resolution of ours. Regret, according to dictionary.com, is to feel sorrow or remorse towards something. Also, according to dictionary.com, dominance is to have control, authority, supreme rule over something. And according to American 2015, a fossil fuel economy is an economy of self-sustaining growth predicated on the growing consumption of fossil fuels and therefore generating a sustained growth in emissions of carbon dioxide. So for my first contention, I want to set a framework here for the word regret. As the affirmative, we want to make it abundantly clear from the start of this debate that it is a debate of value. The wording of the resolution is centered around the use of the word regret. Therefore, it is not a matter of proposing a plan or choosing a policy. This debate is about examining the effects of the dominance of the fossil fuel economy and the following outcomes. Additionally, while something can be beneficial and have positive effects, that doesn't negate all the negative effects that might come along with it. And it is normal to regret those effects. Therefore, this is a debate of a cost and benefits analysis of the effects, not uses, of fossil fuels. So for my second contention, I want to touch a bit on global warming. So currently, where do we stand globally with climate change and the effects of global warming? According to the World Resources Institute in February of this year, the newest report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change paints a troubling picture. Climate change is already impacting every corner of the world, and much more severe impacts are in store if we fail to have greenhouse gas emissions this decade and immediately scale up adaptation. UN Secretary General called the report an atlas of human suffering and a damning indictment of failing climate leadership. Here are 6 takeaways from the report. 1. Climate impacts are already more widespread and severe than expected. 2. We are locked into even worse impacts from climate change in the near term. 3. Risks will escalate quickly with higher temperatures, often causing irreversible impacts of climate change. 4. Inequity, conflict, and development challenges heighten vulnerability to climate risks. 5. Adaptation is crucial. And 6. Some impacts of climate change are already too severe to adapt to. My next point is that scientists around the world are already leading major protests over global warming. According to McFall and Johnson in April 6th of this year, a NASA scientist and 3 others were arrested in LA after chaining themselves to the door of a Chase Bank office building. JP Morgan Chase & Co. has invested more money in fossil fuels than any other bank. The protesters were calling for the company to divest from coal, oil, and gas. Peter Kalmus, who studies climate change at NASA, chained himself to the handle of the bank's glass doors, stating that we've been trying to warn you guys for so many decades that we're heading towards a catastrophe, and scientists of the world are being ignored, and it's got to stop. We're not joking, we're not lying, we're not exaggerating. Scientists are risking arrest in cities across the planet. The actions of Comus and his companions were part of more than a dozen protests staged in cities across the globe through a coalition called Scientist Rebellion, which is dedicated to scientists taking civil actions of disobedience to advocate for climate action. In Berlin, scientists glued their hands to the road to block a bridge. In London, some threw fake oil onto Shell's UK headquarters. In Sydney, 5 protesters were arrested after laying in the street to block traffic in pouring rain. In Washington, D.C., people chained themselves to the fence surrounding the White House. Climate activists are sometimes depicted as dangerous radicals, but the truly dangerous radicals are the countries that are increasing the production of fossil fuels. According to Comus again, it's now or never. This planet is everything, and it's time we start acting like it. My last point is that these protests are for good reason, because there is no escaping the impacts of climate change. It will affect everyone, everywhere, now. According to The Guardian in February of this year, climate breakdown is accelerating rapidly, with many of the impacts being more severe than predicted. Any further delay in global action will miss a brief and rapidly closing window to secure a livable future. Everywhere is affected, with no inhabited region escaping dire impacts from rising temperatures and increasingly extreme weather. About half the global population, about 3.3 to 3.6, okay.
Are you first read?
Yes.
Are you okay?
Yeah.
Do you need a breath? Breathe in.
Yeah.
Got this.
Okay, my name is Lily Holly. We negate the resolved. We, the House, regrets the dominance of the fossil fuel industry economy. We, the House, cannot regret the reliance and use of fossil fuels. No one here is debating their detrimental environmental impact. We can all recognize that fossil fuels are extremely harmful and we need to find ways to improve our environment. That said, to say we regret the overall dominance and use of fossil fuels would be naive, as it would be to say we regret the technology and present-day way we live life. Our first definition comes from Cambridge Dictionary. It defines regret as to feel sorry about a situation, especially something sad or wrong, or a mistake that you have made. When we consider the term regret as it's stated, that implies the historical context of fossil fuels. When establishing a basis for the possibility of regret, we must observe the benefits versus the cost of using fossil fuels. Our second definition comes from Webster's Dictionary, and it defines fossil fuels as a fuel such as coal, oil, or natural gas formed in the earth from plants or animal remains. Therefore, this argument will be examining the transitions between these subsets of fossil fuels underneath the umbrella terminology and how we as a society have used each individual fuel. Our last definition comes from Cambridge Dictionary, and it defines dominance as the situation in which one company, product, etc. has more power or influence or success than others. This is extremely important, as throughout history, fossil fuels were the best solution we had to our energy needs. The opposition speaking of the future place of fossil fuels in our energy economy, or lack thereof, is not inherently connected to the past and present advantages of fossil fuels, which we will be discussing in our argument specifically. And as we consider the cost of fossil fuel dominance, we must also equally consider the positive effects of the energy source being available to humanity. Our first contention states that fossil fuels were necessary to sustain the population growth and the backbone of modern technology. According to Graham Zabel, a scientist who holds a master's in science for demography and energy economics, the planet could not support the 6 billion plus people that exist today without first the success and commercialization of coal, then of oil, and more recently, gas. These energy sources have been necessary for the unprecedented population growth that has occurred over the last 300 years. Furthermore, fossil fuels have been responsible for technological advancements, the biggest one being electricity. Present day, we still heavily rely on coal to be converted and carry electricity that powers much of our everyday life. The shift from wood burning to fossil fuels was also necessary for the population growth in the 1900s. We simply would not be able to sustain life without them. Finally, fossil fuels have played a huge role in agriculture and access to food. Fossil fuels freed up land to produce food and gave power to farm crops and transport food, relieving some food instability through that. Smill, a professor at University of Manitoba, a historian within interdisciplinary research in the fields of energy, spoke on this, saying, "A wind turbine is a pure expression of fossil fuels." Oil has also had a dramatic effect on large moments in history, including both of the world wars. Our second contention states that renewable sources of energy have their own drawbacks and are not always a clear-cut answer for the future of the global economy. Michael Jacob and Jan Christoph Steckel of the Mercator Research Institute on Global Commons and Climate Change wrote that higher energy costs due to the switch to renewable energy sources will negatively impact the development of third world countries seeking industrialization. Besides affecting a country's aggregate growth performance, higher energy prices could also have impacts on more broadly defined measures of human development, such as poverty and inequality. Then they go on to observe that there is a close correlation between per capita energy consumption and the UNDP's Human Development Index for low-income countries. We argue that it is both harmful and unfair to expect less developed countries to be able to feasibly switch off of fossil fuels. We did the crossfire, right?
Alright. Are y'all ready?
I believe I am.
Ready for the crossfire?
I mean, the point I would like to make first and foremost is that we wouldn't be living till the ripe old age of 80 as a society if it weren't for fossil fuels creating the technology we need to live that long. We would not be able to sustain the huge population growth. When we talk about regret, we have to specifically talk about the past and the present. We can't speak of the future in regret because we can't regret the future. It hasn't happened yet.
While that's fair, we also need to be thinking about how we've been treating our use of these in the past years at the moment. We've been so focused on using these fossil fuels, digging it up from other countries, that we haven't really considered using any other kind of opportunity.
We definitely have to consider them. There have been several other different types of energy that have risen up in the past years, in which my other colleagues will present later on. Can you think of an example of where we haven't? Can you cite your sources?
Well, why would we be trying to debate so heavily for climate change action at the moment if we had been trying to act upon it for so long? We've noticed the effects of climate change and how fossil fuels has inherently made it worse for so long, but ultimately there hasn't been much action on it.
You're saying there hasn't been enough of a push to change it. Can you list some alternate sources of energy that we could rely on other than fossil fuels?
We need to be putting research into that. We haven't put nearly enough work into actually trying to develop more resources and trying to find more renewable energy sources that could actually benefit from that.
So since you weren't able to provide any examples, I will list some examples. So wind turbines, solar energy, lithium-ion batteries, is that what it is? Yeah, lithium-ion batteries. Can you think of any others? Like if you're proposing a solution, is that the end? Oh, I was gonna say, if you're proposing a solution, there has to be a solution proposed and an alternate energy source proposed, you know?
This isn't me trying to talk about a solution or a plan.
I was trying to say there's 10 seconds left.
Oh, you were like.
Do y'all want like a minute? I forgot to ask you, do you want like a minute warning?
That'd be helpful.
You did really great. You're really cool.
You did really great. I'm not taking you seriously.
Brooklyn, are you ready?
Yes, ma'am.
I'll wait till you get ready.
Appreciate it.
Of course. I'm not scared. Alright, I'm gonna get.
Alright, my name is Brooklyn Petty, and I will be now doing the line by line followed by disadvantage for the case. So first, the fact that they have the audacity to come up and say that we're not debating about the impacts of climate change here is absolutely ridiculous. That was the whole point of us voting on this resolution to begin with Dr. Lang. So framers' intent, first and foremost, on our casework. As well, with their definition of fossil fuels and the dominance being with the company more power and success, that is inherently a reason to regret this. So extend our fossil fuel economy definition of it being self-sustaining, predicated on the growth and consumption of fossil fuels. Our economy was inherently built on this to feed into it more and more, and that is why we can have to regret it with that. And so, yeah, pretty much with that, extend that and prefer our definition. And we agree it is also a cost-benefit analysis, but we emphasize specifically that this is a claim of value, not policy. We're not trying to provide alternative forms of energy. We are trying to examine the effects that have been seen from the uses of fossil fuels and whether or not we should regret those. Additionally, in regards to the growth for the population and the technology growth and everything, that feeds right back into our definition of fossil fuel economy. We built this to be self-sustaining surrounding fossil fuels. However, I would like to point out that we have known that there are issues with the fossil fuel economy since the 1980s. This is from the USA Today, the conversation in 2022. So Swedish scientists and 1896 calculated that the temperature in the Arctic region would rise 9 or 8 degrees Celsius if carbon dioxide increased by 2.5 or 3 times more. And then Swedish meteorologists agreed, writing in 1901, that the present burning of pit coal is so great that if it continues, it must undoubtedly cause an obvious rise in the means of temperature of the Earth. And in 1912, numerous newspaper articles were released expressing the negative impact of coal and fossil fuels on the climate. The we as a society have failed to transition from a dominant fossil fuel economy to a sustainable economy, and as a result, the global temperature has continued to rise at a rapid pace, which forced us into the current standings we are now, a terrifying future. So this isn't just something we are now looking at the effects. We have known the effects and continue to ignore them, and that is what we regret, because we've had the information available to us for regretting it. But additionally, more specific disadvantage would be the uniqueness. The Russia-Ukraine war, the fight for fossil fuel dominance globally, has caused numerous conflicts historically around the world, the most common current one being the Russia-Ukraine war, which has its roots in fossil fuel dependence. This is level 22. Human-induced climate change in the war on Ukraine has the same roots in fossil fuels and our dependence on them. Whatever is driving Putin and his war machine is fueled by oil and gas. Putin is able to use the oil money to get rid of any domestic political constraints and build a military and war chest to allow these kind of foreign policies. In a way, Russia's fall into this category of the state would include the same as Saddam Hussein's in Iraq. In petro-aggression, it shows that petro-states are countries with economies and federal budgets that rely on oil and gas exports, and they're about 50% more conflict-prone than non-petro states. Also, Putin has had his eyes on Ukraine fossil fuels and has been invading Ukraine for them since 2014. This is COVID-19. If you ask Ukraine's energy minister how long-term economic losses would result in Crimea's annexation, they'll tell you to look towards the sea. Ukraine has lost 80% of its oil and gas deposits in the Black Sea, a significant part of the portion of the infrastructure due to the annexation of Crimea. The Kremlin views these areas as associated hydrocarbon resources and its exclusive war booty. And then finally, the Russia-Ukraine war has escalated to the point of war crimes and genocide. This is Skitsy 22. When we murder innocent civilians who because of who they are, whether it be their religion, their race, or nationality, that is genocide, and that is what Putin is guilty of. It is indisputable that multiple units of Russian militaries have committed mass murder in Ukraine by executing hundreds of civilians